Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, this Thursday, the polls open for a by-election, as we mentioned earlier in the programme, in the constituency of Oldham West and Royton, which the long-serving left-wing Labour MP Michael Meacher represented until his death in October. The ballot will prove the first electoral test of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party. So we send our Adam to see how the battle for Oldham is unfolding.
Oldham was a boomtown in the Cotton era. Now, not so much. A quarter of the population has Pakistani or Bangladeshi heritage, and it's been a safe Labour seat for decades, held by Michael Meacher at the last election with a majority of more than 14,000. Labour's candidate in this by-election is the leader of the local council, but he's having to answer a lot of questions about his leader because it's the party's first election with Jezza in charge.
He's a very honest man, he's a man of principle and substance, and he's somebody that I respect.
I mean, there's big stuff happening in the world at the moment.
Absolutely.
Syria, Paris, airstrikes, all that. Is that affecting this by-election?
There's no doubt that people will raise that on the door. You know, it's on the news every night when people come home from work, and people will want to talk about it. And we have those conversations. And you know what I'm really pleased about is just how warm the reception is on the door. You know, it's quite upbeat, and the challenge for us is to make sure people actually turn out on the day.
Afternoon.
UKIP mentioned Jeremy Corbyn as often as they can. This is the third by-election in this area for their candidate John Bickley. Is it getting to him? What is with this presidential podium here?
Oh no, that's for when our leader comes up to support me. I wouldn't dare present from there when I know Nigel's coming up.
It's not that 3 by-elections have gone to your head. You've got delusions of grandeur now.
No, absolutely not. No, I'm going to see the doctor after this one because I must be mad. But no, it's just I'm doing it because I really believe in what we stand for and what we're trying to do to get our country back.
The Tories were beaten into third place by UKIP in May. This time their leaflets are resolutely local.
It's a local plan, it's a 3-point plan. It's a plan based upon the issues that affect people every day and have an effect on their everyday lives. So first of all, it's tackling crime and antisocial behaviour. Secondly, it's better public transport and more investment. And thirdly, it's cleaning up our streets, dealing with the blight of potholes, fly tipping and littering.
While the Lib Dems are campaigning at the local mosque on the national picture.
We were the only party in Parliament that stood up against the tax credit cuts. Thankfully, the Tories have now come on board with our campaign to stop the tax credit cuts, but we're still concerned that there's 12 billion cuts in welfare.
And the Green candidate, who's deaf and speaks through an interpreter, took me to a local spot that's about to be built on.
This is being planned now to build a warehouse and houses. So this whole area is going to be affected with more traffic. It will create employment, but the people that live in this local area are really going to miss this beautiful environment.
They all want to represent an area of the northwest of England where Winston Churchill began his parliamentary career. It's also claimed to be the place where fish and chips were invented. Don't believe me? There's even a blue plaque commemorating it here in the town centre, which gives me an idea for a Daily Politics by-election quiz. When was the last time you went to the Chippy and what did you have?
About 3 days ago, fish, chips and peas. When in Oldham, you have to. I mean, it's a law. Have you not seen it?
There's one next door here, and I have to stop myself going in there because I could definitely do fish and chips every day.
I have a terrible diet, so yes, so I eat far too many chips, I'm afraid.
Is it a very green thing, fish and chips?
I'm a dietitian by profession, but what we need is a mixed, balanced diet with lots of fruit and vegetables. And did you know that mushy peas would count as one of your 5 a day?
If I'm honest, there's more appetite for fish and chips here than there is for the by-election. We'll find out who tastes victory in the early hours of Friday morning.
Adam Fleming reported there, and a full list of candidates standing in the Oldham West and Royton by-election can be found on the BBC website. And to discuss Thursday's by-election, we're joined by the political academic Rob Ford, who's been particular strength of following UKIP and so on. Now, if you take this seat, it's in solid Labour territory. It's been a solid Labour seat. I think only 2 years in its existence it hasn't been in its modern format. It is the kind of seat that a Labour opposition, as I emphasise, being in opposition, a by-election, it should just automatically win.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Oldham is also where Ed Miliband faced his first electoral test in the other seat, Oldham East. And when he fought that by-election, or when Labour fought that by-election, their majority there went up strongly, whereas everyone now expects the majority in Oldham West to fall. The question is, A, how far does it fall, and B, does the seat actually fall into the grounds of being in jeopardy?
Do we know if there was much of a personal vote for Michael Meacher? He had represented that seat forever, and he was well known locally. And of course, they have another strong local candidate fighting Labour this time from the sort of centre right of the party. Does the Labour candidate, or the lack of Mr. Meacher, is that a factor?
It could be. Long-term MPs do build up personal followings. They become part of the local furniture, so to speak. And in particular, it may play into an issue that Labour really have to worry about, which is turnout. We're having this election right at the beginning of December. I've just come from the northwest. The weather there was awful. And there may be a lot of voters who would have been willing to turn out for Michael, who was their local MP for so long, but might not be willing to turn out for a candidate who's perhaps not as familiar to them.
We're all here. Obsessed isn't quite the word. We're just amazed at what's going on in the Labour Party at the moment and following every move that Mr. Corbyn makes. Is there evidence that though is having cut through to the voters in a constituency like Oldham?
Well, that's one of the things that we're going to be watching Friday's results very closely for. There's two things we're going to want to watch for. Firstly, what happens to the Labour vote in white working class areas where a lot of the polling suggests Mr. Corbyn is not popular. And secondly, what happens to the Conservative vote? It's about a 20% Conservative vote in that seat right now. We don't know how those voters will react and whether or not they'll be backing a UKIP candidate on the basis that when we look at the national polling, Conservatives really dislike Mr. Corbyn a lot. Will they be willing to vote for UKIP on the basis of a kind of anyone but Jez type argument?
Yeah, and it'll be a tactical vote. Well,
exactly, a tactical
they might
vote.
well do that, will they not?
Well, that's what happened in the late 90s when people were very hacked off with the long incumbent Conservative government. The Lib Dems benefited with a lot of tactical voting by Labour voters in the south. Now, will Northern Conservative voters say, well, we can't win around here, but we can send a message about rejecting the Labour Party's current leadership that we really dislike by voting for the UKIP candidate? We don't know that's going to happen, but we're going to watch.
So we're looking at three variables here. Whether the Tory vote collapses in favour of UKIP, how big the turnout will be in the British Asian community and voting still loyally for Labour, and how big the defections of the white working class Labour vote to UKIP. Is that the way to look at it?
That's exactly right. That's the three big variables. The only sort of fourth I would add there is what proportion of the white working class vote say, well, I'm not willing to vote for UKIP, but I'm not willing to vote for Labour either in the current circumstances, and I'm going to stay home. So that could also add to the turnout problem. But you're right. Tory tactical voting for UKIP, Labour to UKIP, defections and turnout amongst the South Asian community probably decide the seat. And
these imponderables make it quite hard then to I mean, we all think that the Labour majority is going to be substantially reduced. It's 14,700, I think, at the general election. But because of these imponderables, it's quite hard to be sure exactly how the cookie crumbles.
No, exactly. I mean, you'd have to say Labour go in favourites just because the sheer size of that cushion. I mean, it's a 35 percentage point majority. You shouldn't be losing seats like that under any circumstances, frankly. But we don't know if it'll be a narrow hold. I mean, if it's a narrow hold, that's a big problem for the current leadership. If they lose the seat, then it's a huge problem.
Losing would be huge,
yes.
But narrow, a win is a win kind of thing, even if it's a bit embarrassing that you couldn't hold it by thousands of votes.
I think that's right, and I think Labour might well do better than we're hearing here.
Yeah.
I mean, the kind of policies that Michael Meacher espoused are actually quite close to Jeremy Corbyn's, and that connection will be there. And for people who want a candidate who is more to the centre, then they've got someone who appears to be a popular and well-known Labour candidate locally. So I think that it might not be quite as grim as we've just been hearing.
Well, we shall see. Thank you for coming on, and we'll see the outcome. And viewers should know that we will, off the back of this week on Thursday night on BBC One, we will immediately morph into the This Week by-election special. We'll be with you all through the night until we get the count from Oldham and bring you the result of what is turning out now to be a rather interesting by-election. So that's one for night owls. Some of you have to join us. We don't like to talk to ourselves.
I've been getting away with it.